Welcome, everybody, to our live stream coming to you from the Huckabee Theater in Hendersonville, just outside of Nashville. This is the scene where we'll be taping our show this weekend. It's going to be spectacular. We'll tell you a little more about it later, but right now we're just happy to have you join us. Pam Case is with me, as she is each Friday for our live stream. She's going to be reading questions that you send in. If you'll send them in the chat, and the sooner you send them, the better, because we're more likely to get to the ones that are sent in early. For more visibility, send us a super chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can, but we certainly have a lot of great news stories and some videos that you're going to want to see today. We've got moderators who watch the chat for your questions, and then they forward them to us. Well, today, as you know, President Trump is in legal trouble. It seems that for the 1000th time, the walls are closing in on him. That's what we'll talk about. And we'll dispel the nonsensical idea that Democrats are team normal. Oh, yeah. And minorities and activists clash in a major way all across the country. One of the things we like to do is to have a little pre-show poll. For those of you that get into the lobby of the live stream early, we ask a question and we find out what's on your mind. Pam, what was the pre-show poll today? All
right, a little lighter approach, I suppose, to the news of the week. In how much trouble is President Trump? All right, here we go. The walls are so closing in. The shoe is definitely going to drop, or the noose is super duper tight. Bottom line, or number 4, none. This is all for show. What do you think won that one?
I bet people said D.
None.
For show.
All for show, 80%.
Yep.
So the walls are closing in, 13%, 4% for the shoe dropping, and 3% for the noose.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, our top comment from last week's live stream comes from Harold Irwin. He made a cogent point about Joe Biden's fitness for office, or lack thereof. Here's what he said. I quote him. He says, "I'm 78 years young. Whenever I see a medical person who asks questions about my overall health, one question always gets asked. Have you fallen recently?" You know, I can relate to that because for the past like 20 years, every time I go to the doctor, it doesn't matter. It could be the ear doctor, it could be, you know, the dentist, whoever I go to. Have you had any falls?
Yes. It just becomes the question, Gov. I'm familiar.
Yeah, well, what is that about even, I guess?
Yeah, well, they're a little concerned about you and me,
yeah,
those in our age.
Oh, here's another one they always ask. Do you feel safe in your home? And I love to say, well, only when my wife isn't there.
Do you really say that?
I really do, and they just, you know, they're stunned.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm wondering, are they writing that down? They're going to send that to somebody, and they're going to come knock on my door. Who knows?
Well, it's written down. It certainly is.
Yes, it is. Anyway, here's my question for you this week. Donald Trump has been indicted for having documents. Joe Biden and Mike Pence had them as well. Will they be indicted, or should they be? We'd love to get your answers in the chat or in the comment section below, so be sure to let us know. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, right now as we're getting started is the very best time to do it. There are fewer people trying to punch the button that you're punching, and you're punching it right now, the subscribe button. When you do that, that little bell, that's the notification bell. Be sure to punch that as well. And we'd love for you to say, I like this. That sounds so egotistical, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Like the page.
Today's world.
It is. It's weird. How many likes do you have? I feel like I'm in the 3rd grade, you know. Brenda says she likes you. Do you like her? You remember those little
I do.
notes back and forth? Anyway, like the page, because that's what we have to do, and share it. And the reason all that actually is important is because if we don't have engagement, and that's what all the subscribe button and all this stuff does, there is a really interesting thing. YouTube starts closing in. The walls start closing in. So by having all of this social engagement, more people get to see the content. Now, I think that anybody who signed up for it ought to get it, period.
Right.
That's how it ought to work. So we have to play the game. That's what we're doing. So we're not just sitting around here saying, oh, please like us, because we'll cry if you don't.
Well, we have the best audience in the world, and they know what to do. So subscribe and like and share and help us out.
That's good. Well, we've been talking about the walls closing in. You know, the Democrats have been saying the walls are closing in on Trump since 2017. Watch.
The walls feel like they are closing in.
But as the walls close in around the president,
Donald Trump feels the walls closing in.
This is a guy who feels like the walls are closing in.
Are the walls closing in?
The walls are closing in on the presidency.
It says as the walls begin to close around him.
The political walls closing in on him.
This is a president that feels the walls closing in.
The walls are closing in on Donald Trump.
I think the walls are finally closing in.
The walls are closing in, as has been said before.
You know what makes that funny is when you hear them, and it goes back to 2017, his first year in office, and every commentator on every network, walls are closing in. Do they get a script for this stuff?
Well, I think they do. They just need maybe some new script writers.
They really do. It's like somebody writes a script and they all just dutifully read the same stupid script. And that's what I see. And it's amazing to watch these people. They do it shamelessly. Yeah. It's like nobody ever is going to find out that they said the exact same words. Could they at least be more creative? The walls are coming in. Why don't you say the floor is falling out from under you? The ceiling is coming down. I mean, come up with some new metaphors other than the walls are closing in. And here it is, 2023. We're 8 years in, and the walls have not yet closed. But boy, they're trying. They are trying. Obviously, the big news story of the week, and I mean the really big one, is that Donald Trump is going to be officially, I guess he has been indicted. It will be formalized next Tuesday in Miami. And it is just astonishing. Never in American history, never has a sitting or former president been indicted. This has never happened. We're in totally new territory here. But with Donald Trump, we're also in the territory of this is one more chapter in the we can't beat him, we're going to have to destroy him. And this has been the death of 1,000 cuts trying to go after him. And this is particularly troublesome because what they're saying is that he mishandled the documents and obstructed justice. Now, what they don't charge him with, which would be the underlying crime, is the possession of the documents at all. So why didn't they do that? Well, the reason is obvious. If they charge him with possession, how do they not charge Joe Biden and Mike Pence? But here's what they still have to answer for. Donald Trump was the president. He had a right to those records under the Presidential Records Act, and he also had the right to declassify them. He's the only person who can just declassify documents. Mike Pence couldn't do it as vice president. Joe Biden couldn't when he was vice president, and Joe Biden should never have had documents related to his Senate or his vice presidential days, and he had both. And they were not stored under lock and key like Donald Trump's were at Mar-a-Lago with Secret Service 24 hours a day watching them. They were stored in Joe's garage, where his Corvette was, and where Hunter, Mr. Ukraine Chinese, I'll do business with anybody that'll pay me, had access to the garage and used to drive the Corvette around. Had him at the University of Delaware, had him in a warehouse in Chinatown in D.C., had him all over the place, 1,850 boxes of stuff. And nobody's talking about charging him. Nothing. Folks, I'm telling you, if this is something that the deep state gets away with, we're toast. I mean, just mark it down. And some people say, well, Trump ought to get out of the race for this. Not on your life, because if he were to get out, if he were to say, okay, I'm done, I'm just throwing in the towel. Do you think they're going to be nicer to Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or Vivek Ramaswamy or any other Republican who is running for president? Do you think for a moment they're going to say, ooh, we got rid of Trump, now we'll be really nice and gentle to these others?
No way.
They're going to be worse because they're going to say, we know the formula now. We know how to beat these guys. And here's what we don't know. How many of them could withstand 8 consecutive, nonstop years of this kind of harassment and not just say, I'm done, I'm finished? Yeah. How many of their families would be able to say, we're still in the fight, rather than just say, let's quit. Yeah. We can't stand it anymore. So I'm just convinced that this is an Alamo moment. It really is. And I hope it doesn't end like the Alamo. But we got to take the stand. We absolutely have to take the stand. And here's what I'd call upon every Republican candidate. Next Tuesday, when Donald Trump is indicted in Miami, suspend your campaign, go to Miami, and stand with him on this. Don't support him. Don't expect you to. I'm not saying you should endorse him. Heck, you're running against him. And even say, look, I'm running against him. I plan to beat him. But I don't want to beat him because some Democrat prosecutor has weaponized the Justice Department and is going to take him out of the race. I want to beat him fair and square, which I plan to do, but this is not how our Constitution deals with election. This is election interference in the worst way. That's what I want to see happen. I truly, truly do. Well, President Trump, as you can imagine, has already responded, and here's some of the things he had to say in response.
Very sadly, we're a nation in decline, and yet they go after a popular president, a president that got more votes than any sitting president in the history of our country, by far, and did much better the second time in the election than the first. And they go after him on a boxes hoax, just like the Russia hoax and all of the others. This has been going on for 7 years. They can't stop because it's election interference at the highest level. There's never been anything like what's happened.
And there really isn't anything like what is happening. I hope it makes you angry. I hope it makes you want to engage in this entire process of civics, and that you will not relent and you will speak up and be bold, because otherwise this is what we're going to see from now on. I know why they fear him. They fear so much that if Donald Trump gets back in office, he is going to do some serious house cleaning in Washington. And if anybody thinks that we can just oil the machinery that's there and our country's okay, you're delusional. You are delusional. Somebody has got to go and disrupt some stuff. Has to happen. Speaking of disruption, I don't know if you know this, but did you realize the Democrats and all the people on the really radical left, they're very, very normal people, according to them. People that want to mutilate the genitals of young children and chemically castrate them. The ones that don't know the difference between a man and a woman and believe that men can get pregnant. They're the normal people, according to themselves. Just watch.
We know that Democrats, President Biden, folks in the House and the Senate, we're team reasonable, we're team normal, we're team get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Very normal, very, very normal indeed. I'm just stunned that they think that the things they stand for, including let's get rid of gas stoves, you know, let's make everybody buy an electric car, even though we don't have enough electricity to run what we have electrically now, but let's go get cars, that way it'll really shut the grid down. That all of this is normal. This is insane. It's totally, totally crazy. Interestingly, in the midst of all this, do you wonder when the timing of this story about Donald Trump came out in the indictment? What happened yesterday? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Christopher Wray finally turned over that Form 1023, the FBI form, to the Oversight Committee in Congress, because he was on the verge of being held in contempt of Congress. So I guess he finally said, well, okay, I'll let him have it. And he did. And they came out saying, we saw this, and there's evidence from a very highly credible, confidential human source that Joe Biden, the sitting president, who was then vice president, took $5 million in an outright bribe to influence foreign policy. That's a big story. Now, how do you bury a story that big? Well, first of all, you give it to a press that doesn't care. Secondly, you create a story that's so big to the press that they ignore this one. And that's exactly what they did. And Joe Biden is asked about, what about this evidence that you took money from a foreign government? Here's his funny answer. He should be a comedian.
Bribery allegation. Congresswoman Nancy Mace says there's damning evidence in the FBI file that you sold out the country. Do you have a response to the congressional Republicans?
Where's the money? I'm joking.
Mr. President,
it's a bunch of malarkey.
Mr. President, what?
Well, I think we should know where's the money. I mean, after all, this guy, we know what his salary's been, $174,000 a year as a senator, and then it got to be a little better than that, not much better, as vice president. And he owns several homes, and these are high-dollar homes, and you wonder, where did he get that? I mean, he's been in government service this time. How do you become a multimillionaire? Well, maybe it's because you're on the take, and that's what we need to find out. I think it's interesting that the thing that Joe Biden is most concerned about is not the integrity of the country, not going after a former president in some phony criminal indictment. Here's what matters to him most, to make sure that we have transgender people in the military. I ain't making this up.
As president, I was proud to end the ban on transgender troops in our military, sign the Respect for Marriage Act, strengthen the civil rights protections for LGBT Americans, and advance LGBT human rights around the globe.
There you go. LGBT, E-I-E-I-O. Normal, total normal. That's what we want for our troops. It's more important, not that they can fire a gun or, use a cannon or fly an airplane and drop bombs. That doesn't matter. As long as the men are comfortable in the skirt, that's what matters. That's what matters, by gosh, that we have transgender. This is the new America for Joe Biden. And by the way, speaking of their idea of normal, they think it's normal that the government should be considered a partner to raise your children. It's not just you're a parent. So what? You're just part of the picture. It's the government that gets to help raise your children. That's what Joe says.
Not somebody else's kids. They're all our kids.
They're all our kids. No, they're not, Joe. They're not your kids. I know you'd like for them to be, so you can sniff their hair and hold them and touch them in some really strange ways, but they're not your kids. They belong to a mom and a dad. And I don't know if you heard, but the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a fraud of an organization, they're a joke. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not helping anybody in poverty. But they came out with a new list of a hate group. And you know who's on it? The Moms of Liberty. You know who those people are? Those are mothers who go to school board meetings, and they protest having their 6- and 7-year-old children shown pornographic material, and they object to their children being told that if they're biological boys but are feeling feminine, that they should start playing with dolls and wear dresses to school, and not to tell your parents this, because this is not something your parents need to know. And the Moms of Liberty have said, no, we're not tolerating that. They're a hate group now determined by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is terrible stuff. And it gets worse. Pete Buttigieg, who is our distinguished Department of Transportation Secretary, makes one of the most idiotic statements I've heard a government official say. And he draws a connection between transgenderism in sports and our infrastructure law. You got to see it to believe it. So see it.
Now you see the attacks on the LGBTQ community, especially on the trans community, and what they are going through. And, I think it's being done out of a perception that it is politically convenient to target vulnerable groups. And honestly, I think where it largely comes from is folks who don't want to talk about why they were against the infrastructure law that's building the roads and bridges.
Talking about a non sequitur, how do you somehow leap from biological males competing in sports against women, and somehow that's all connected to not supporting the infrastructure law? Right. That's the nuttiest thing I think I've heard of in a long time. But hey, those are the normal people, okay? They're normal. We're crazy, right? That's what they think. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, like us, share, tell everybody you're watching, and tell them they ought to watch. I bet we have a few questions coming in by now, don't we?
Oh, we absolutely do, sir. So let's just dig right in. So Kathy W. says, I am angry, and I've started contacting my South Carolina senator and representative. What else can we do?
Make sure that you and every friend you have and family member are registered to vote, and do not let anything keep you from the polls. I don't want to hear people say, well, it doesn't matter, my vote won't count. It won't if you don't cast it. And I think this time the Republicans are learning, vote early. Don't wait till Election Day. Vote early. Why? Well, because that's the new game. And do mail-in ballots. Make sure that everybody you know in your neighborhood has a ballot and they vote. Nothing illegal. Strictly keep it on the up and up. No dead people voting. There's going to be plenty of that on the other side. But by golly, we've got to vote. But we have to start speaking out. The biggest reason I think we've gotten into the mess we're in is because so many people, in the desire to be polite, not have confrontations with their friends or neighbors and their family members, just sort of hold their tongue and say, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to create friction. Folks, I'm going to be honest with you. It's time that we have some friction. And I'm not talking about physically altercating with people. I'm just saying that when somebody says, well, I think it's perfectly normal for a little boy to have surgery to cut off his male parts, or that it's okay for a 12-year-old girl to have her breasts chopped off so she can be a boy. I think we need to say that's crazy. That same girl can't legally get a tattoo in most states, but she can go through this irreparable surgery? We've got to quit pretending that that's normal, because it's not, that's for sure. Another question, what you got?
All right, in light of, I guess, the news with Trump and the indictments this week, Dale Hammond is asking, keeping documents in a garage is not mistreating documents? Can you explain?
It is mistreating it because, first of all, he was never supposed to have them. His possession of them was a violation of the law. I mean, just clear and simple, it was a violation of the law. Now, the Justice Department have said, well, he didn't intend to do it. Doesn't matter. Because ignorance is not a defense against a crime. So if you're going to go after Donald Trump because he had something, which he had the right to have, and you don't go after Joe Biden, something ain't right.
Patricia Berruman today is asking Gov, why aren't the Republicans doing more instead of talking up a storm? Nothing happens to those politicians.
There's a limit to what they can do right now because all they have is half of the legislative branch. They've got the House. And they are doing some things. I mean, if you look at what James Comer, head of the Oversight Committee, is doing, he went after Christopher Wray about that document to the point that Wray finally coughed it up. So we are seeing some things starting to happen. I think Jim Jordan and the Judiciary Committee, they're putting these whistleblowers on the stand and getting information. There'll be a limit to what they can get done because the Justice Department has no interest at all in pursuing some of this criminal activity that might embarrass their side. They just don't, which is horrible. But they can at least continue to expose it. And then if we can get the Senate and the White House and the House and put courageous people there, we can see some things happen.
All right, this ties into as well. Jay Luther writing today, 24% GOP, 24% Democrats, and 48% independent. Please address the numerous polls that indicate that voters are leaving both parties in droves.
I've not seen those numbers, 24, 24, and 48, so I don't know. You'd have to send to me where that comes from. I'm not seeing it. I think people are more lined up to a particular point of view. There's certainly a large group of independents that could go either way, but I don't think it's 48%. So send to me where the source of that is. I don't recall anything like that.
Chris Ollison is writing this afternoon, has anyone ever questioned Jill Biden on how she can go along with her husband remaining in the political realm? She must be able to see how he's deteriorated in the last few months.
And the question is, has anybody talked to her? Probably not. And who would it be? I mean, who's going to go and say, Jill, have you thought about the reason your husband falls downstairs and trips all over the stage and can't remember what he's reading and has to be helped on and off the stage? Have you ever thought about maybe that's a problem? I don't know who it is that says that to her, that still has a job the next day. I don't know. Yeah. So,
Mr. Wright asking, are we a country of laws or men? I can't tell anymore.
I can. We're a country of men. We're no longer a country of laws. If we were, Donald Trump wouldn't be indicted, or if he were going to be indicted, so would Joe Biden and Mike Pence. And I like Mike Pence, and I don't think Mike Pence did anything criminal either. Don't think he ought to be indicted. But this nonsense of going after Donald Trump is just frightening to me because it really does show that these people have decided that they don't care what the law is. What they care about is winning elections, even if it means cheating. And that really disturbs me, for sure. I want to go to this clip. This is Janet Yellen. She's talking about, even though we've had record revenues at the federal level, maybe you don't know that, but we have had record levels of money coming in. So how is it that we're running a $31 trillion deficit or debt, 31 trillion debt? How come we have a deficit if we got more money coming in than we've ever had? It's because we're spending more than even the more money that we have. And in spite of that, Janet Yellen won't admit that we're spending too much. She says we need to raise more money. Watch.
Revenue needs to be part of that discussion. It's not all a matter of spending. I think we, in the interest of tax fairness and having the resources to invest in our economy, we also need to be considering proposals that would enhance revenue while also controlling spending.
I pulled up some figures, and I think this may help you understand something. This idea that, well, the rich people aren't paying their fair share. A little fact here for Janet Yellen and for anyone else. In 2018, the top 1% of income earners, that 1% that Elizabeth Warren hates so much, they earned 21% of all U.S. income, but they paid 40% of all federal income taxes. So they paid far more than anyone else. The top 10% earned 48% of the income. They paid 71% of all federal income taxes. So when you hear people say the people at the top don't pay their fair share, by percentage, they're paying far more. And it goes another way. The lowest income Americans end up paying about 0.04%. That's what the tax cut. No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. The lowest income people, after the Trump tax cuts, their taxes were lowered by 10%. The top 1%, their taxes were lowered by 0.04%. So there's this notion that the rich people aren't paying their fair share. The fact is they're paying 71% of all the taxes that are collected. So I don't see how you can end up saying they're not paying their fair share. Let's shift topics. We've got a lot to cover, and we're going to have a hard time getting to it. Illegal aliens. Karine Jean-Pierre talks about the busing of illegal aliens to places across the country. She says it's dangerous.
Or flying migrants around the country without any coordination with the federal government. We've talked about this, state or local officials as well, is dangerous and unacceptable. And we'll continue to be very, very clear about that. It is dangerous and unacceptable because you're putting people's lives at risk. And it's dangerous and unacceptable because you're actually putting a lot of pressure on these states and local areas.
How ridiculous. What's really putting people's lives at risk is having these people walk 1,000 miles across terrain and end up getting robbed and raped and subjecting themselves to getting across the river by some drug cartel who charges them their life savings and promises them freedom. And when they get here, they have no idea what they're going to do. And little kids are turned into sex slaves. That's dangerous, Karine. I don't know why you don't recognize it. It's very amazing. And all these Democrat mayors and governors who want to be sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, well, they've been begging for it. Now they're getting it. And they hate it. They can't stand it. They don't know what to do with it. Eric Adams, the mayor of Sanctuary City, New York, he's got a great idea. They filled up all the hotels there. They've run out of space. And so he's saying that families will want to put these illegal immigrants in their spare rooms. Watch.
It is my vision to take the next step to this, to go to the faith-based locales, and then move to private residence. There are residents who are suffering right now because of economic challenges. They have spare rooms, they have locales, and if we can find a way to get over the 30-day rule and other rules that government has in its place, we can take that $4.2 billion, 4.3 even maybe now, that we potentially will have to spend, and we can put it back in the pockets of everyday New Yorkers, everyday houses of worship, instead of putting it in the pockets of corporations.
Yeah, that's what I'm sure every New York family wants to do. It's going to just turn their home into a VRBO for illegals who can't even speak the language of the household. That's brilliant. Mr. Mayor, just out of curiosity, how many illegal aliens are you going to put at Gracie Mansion, the official residence of the mayor? Just curious. When you start saying that you've got 4 rooms that you're not using, you're going to put some folks there, please then give the rest of the New Yorkers a call and ask them to give up their spare rooms. That may be one of the nuttiest things I've ever heard of. Yeah. Let's take a couple of questions that we've got so much I want to get to, and we may not be able to make it, but we'll
Absolutely. Try. We do have a super chat from Mitchell Ryan asking for you to share, do you think that Trump will beat this indictment?
I personally do. I think he's got good legal grounds for it, and I think he'll beat it politically. My prediction, I could be wrong. I think his numbers go up as a result of this.
Yeah. MAGA Man says, if Trump was not legit, why would he put himself in this line of fire for all this nonsense? He could have just retired a billionaire and play golf every day.
Good point.
Yeah.
And you know something else people don't remember? He never took a salary for being president. He gave it away to charity. He didn't take a dime. You know, when I hear people say, well, he just did it to build his brand. No, he had a brand. He destroyed it by being president. He had a much bigger, better, more lucrative brand when he wasn't in politics than since he has gotten in politics. And he never took a penny of salary as president. He gave every dime of it away.
All right, we have another super chat, too, from Jeffrey Berman this afternoon. When will you have Jonathan Cahn on your show? He follows all that's going on from a biblical perspective.
We have had Jonathan on before. He's a great, great author and speaker and has some phenomenal insights. His book, The Harbinger, was one of the most just spellbinding books I've read in the last 10 years. So maybe we need, maybe we need to have him back.
Yes.
I'm going to real quickly go through some things because this is Pride Month. Now, you probably won't see us making a big deal of it on our show because pride goeth before a fall, and a haughty spirit is not a good thing. So we don't particularly engage in that. We still believe here that the rainbow is God's promise to Noah and to the rest of us, that he won't destroy the world by flood. It's not something that we celebrate, a lifestyle that is not in keeping with biblical standards. So it's starting to happen that people are pushing back on some of this LGBTQ, EIEIO stuff. And this is one from a 5th grade teacher on the Dr. Phil show. This guy is brilliant. Watch.
Well, what's a man to you? You define a man for me.
You have chromosomes that are X and Y. That's what a man is.
So why are we just looking at the science of this as an example when we've learned sex and gender identity are they're completely different things?
They're not completely different.
They are completely different.
Completely different words.
And sex is what you're born with, the sexual reproductive organs you have. Gender is what you identify with. They're completely
Well, I don't
different
accept that
things.
distinction. You have to argue for it. You're just giving a conclusion. You're just making it up.
And there's a whole lot more to that whole exchange with Dr. Phil. It was absolutely brilliant. The guy was terrific. 5th grade teacher, and he was very calm. And, you know, they tried to say that he was full of hate. He said, I don't hate anybody. I'm not sounding like a hateful person. I thought it was just terrific. Here's what's beginning to happen, and it's rattling the left because they don't know what to do about it. It's one thing for them to be angry at Christians because those of us who are Bible-believing Christians believe that there's a definite difference between men and women. There are 2 genders. God created male and female, created he, them, the scripture says. And so we believe that. But you know who else believes that? Muslims. And Muslims are rising up against this in the Montgomery County, Maryland School Board. It was the Muslims who showed up to protest the curriculum.
Protect our children! 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 Protect our children!
Protect our children, the Muslim mothers are saying. Good for them. You know, now we've got something absolutely in common. Here's what's frightening. While if you sign up and line up with those who believe that men can have babies and, you know, you need to buy tuck-friendly clothing for your children at Target, you're going to be really opposed to people like this guy who's standing on public property. This past week in Reading, Pennsylvania, got arrested for protesting a pride parade. I want you to watch this and think about what this says for your faith if you're a Christian.
You know who's cheering for us? The people that are in hell. So you do you, and I'm going to do me. This is public property. You. God is not. That's all. Grab this one, brother.
Getting this on film.
Can I give him my bag? I'll stuff him. Joe, I'm going to need you to go to 128.
I'm the executive director of Reading Pride Celebration, and it is my
God bless you, brother.
I hope this guy gets some good lawyers from maybe the ACLJ or Alliance Defending Freedom or Pacific Justice Institute or Liberty Counsel or one of the organizations and sues the ever-living daylights out of the Reading city government and police department. I really do. That is frightening to me that a guy standing on public property, minding his business in a protest that was peaceful and legit, he gets arrested because he didn't agree with the gay pride parade. That's really disturbing. It's not too late to leave your questions or comments in the chat section. We will hope you would do that. And boy, we've had a lot of stuff going on, but hey, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit the like button and the notification bell. And remember, Live with Mike streams every Friday unless we tell you otherwise.